सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The gift of a sacrificial cow was no great thing for the great hide merchant Haji Noor Muhammad Zakaria among the grandees of Kolkata. But the letter that arrived the week before Bakrid in 1896 from an obscure small-town cleric opened up dangerous dilemmas. Local Muslim mill workers had long sacrificed cows out of sight of their Hindu neighbors. Labor tensions, though, had been surging in the newly industrializing belt, and Muslims, migrants from the countryside, had begun increasingly asserting their religious identity as a means of organization. English-owned mill managements and notables like Zakaria worried that riots would shut down business. The colonial authorities cracked down on the planned sacrifice. Low-class Muslims were denied railway tickets, historian Shubho Basu has recorded, and the military was deployed across the mill towns. The mosque itself was surrounded by armed police on Bakrid. The Imam never got his cow. Forgotten anniversaries find ways to tear through our willful amnesia. The Kolkata suburb of Rishra, the site of that unremembered cow slaughter crisis of a century and a quarter ago, is now again being torn by violence that erupted after a Ram Navami procession last month. Like other conflicts of identity, communal conflicts more closely resemble warfare than the kinds of problems police forces are traditionally designed to engage. Large organized forces of rioters use techniques of urban combat to assault the territorial frontiers of segregated communities, sometimes turning entire cities into battlegrounds. From late in the colonial period to the carnage that tore apart Gujarat in 2002, the Indian state has known that only the military can really seize back control of cities once full-scale communal violence ignites. The resurgence of communal violence is a political issue, but it's also an issue that illustrates the anemia of India's police and criminal justice infrastructure. The inability of police forces to control violence, even in states where governments are committed to doing so, should be setting off alarms in police and intelligence services nationwide. Little is unknown about the new wave of riots erupting across India each Ram Navami. Lawyer Chandar Uday Singh has shown religious processions are being turned into territorial assertions of Hindu nationalist power. This isn't new, however. A government investigation of post-independence riots conducted in 2007 noted that religious processions were, and I quote, the largest single cause of communal conflagrations. The report even suggested banning processions which were not customary by the cutoff date of 1990. Former Supreme Court Judge Dinshaw Madan's investigation of the 1970 riots in Bhiwandi, which according to the report claimed the lives of 43 people, found the violence began with a Shiv Jayanti procession which insisted on passing by a mosque. Ever since 1963, Madan noted, Hindu nationalist organizations had begun taking out Shiv Jayanti processions that played music and threw gulal while passing by the mosque. The processions led to violence in 1967 and again and again. The Justice Raghubar Dayal Commission of Inquiry into the Sholapur riots of 1967 found a similar history of violence involving processions in the city dating back to 1927. Even though the colonial state understood the importance of policing, it lacked the resources to impose order through coercion, short of outright military force. The historian Erin Giuliani has noted that while the colonial state wanted to ensure control over society, it also wanted to minimize its expenses. Giuliani says there were just 532 police officers in all of Bhagalpur in 1862, each one responsible on average for a staggering 3,740 people. The principal task of the colonial police, scholar Prashant Kidambi has written, was birthing the rise of an orderly industrial state, not regulating conflicts. The proletarian casual economy and culture of the streets, he notes, represented a threat to this orderly industrial system. The police focused on regulating the world of the gunda, the brothel, the street market, and liquor peddler. For a numerically challenged, overworked, and poorly equipped force, he writes, petty street offences involving the poor provided an attractive alternative to the more strenuous task of chasing up serious crimes. That might sound familiar to you even today, and that's because it is. Facing large-scale violence, moreover, the police force usually simply collapsed. In 1893, a Hindu-Muslim confrontation near the Jama Masjid in Mumbai escalated into rioting that claimed 80 lives. Festivals like Muharram led to Shia-Sunni violence that forced authorities eventually to make the expensive decision to call in the military. The apparatus of police built by the colonial state, historian Ranabir Samadar has noted in a very perceptive analysis, was based fundamentally on the obedience of individuals and individual subjection to the institution of law and order after society no longer required the feudal form of allegiance. That is, people just gave up being subservient to their feudal master with being subservient to the imperial state. The communal riot, though, marked the point where this relationship of obedience broke down. God, after all, commanded a more primal allegiance than the state and let subjugated populations break the bonds of deference to their master. The lesson from crises like Rishra was that communal tensions needed to be crushed before, not after, they ignited. The colonial authorities, however, proved strangely reluctant to learn this lesson. The historian Nariaki Nakazoto has dissected the police response to the savage Kolkata communal killings of 1946, in which over 4,000 people were killed. Following the first reports of communal violence, which arrived early on the morning of 16 August 1946, it took colonial authorities more than 24 hours to initiate a response. Fortress Commander Kolkata, Brigadier JPC McKinley, who was responsible ultimately for the city's security, flatly refused to deploy his troops, even after Indian police officials sent out into the city said the killings were out of control. And on the morning of 17th August, troops sent to the city received orders not to fire on mobs. The police, acting on the basis of an emergency plan, simply retreated into their police stations, knowing they had neither the numbers nor the training to end the massacres. The communications of Bengal Governor F.J. Burrows help understand the method behind this apparent English madness. Imperial authorities just didn't care whether Indians slaughtered each other or not. The violence, Burrows assured his bosses, quote, so far have been markedly communal and not, repeat not, in any way anti-British. So they were fine with it. The British authorities, however, pushed troops into the industrial suburbs where the interests of English-owned businesses were implicated and made sure things didn't get out of hand. Less easy to understand is the response of India's post-independence police forces. The superintendent of police at Jalgaon, Justice Madan, noted, simply ignored a crash message from his superiors about the communal clashes that began on 8 May 1970. Local police forces did nothing amidst the rioting other than stage some ineffectual lathi charges, the judge observed, and those only on Muslims. Fire was not used against rioters until the superintendent of police returned, 12 hours too late, just like in a Hindi film. Enquiries conducted into subsequent communal riots, like Justice B.N. Srikrishna's landmark probe into the 92-93 violence in Mumbai, have shown endemic communal bias at the level of the constabulary, which probably mirror those of the society around them. After all, police are drawn from a society. efforts to stamp out those biases have proceeded over the decades very fitfully. Larger problems in the institutions of the police itself, which are key to its ability to function irrespective of the bias or of its rank and file, haven't been addressed at all. A draft Uttar Pradesh government disaster management plan for communal riots, which was drawn up in 2009 and then just fell by the wayside, noted that police resources are, I quote, often deployed unimaginatively and even frittered away on unauthorized duties. The plan underlined the need to improve police training and capabilities and put in place a clear disaster management protocol. Following the crisis in Rishra, the sub-divisional officer of Srirampur, who had no intention of wasting resources on creating a modern police disaster management plan, tried to hammer out a compromise between the communities. The Muslims would be allowed to sacrifice a cow in a distant graveyard far from the sight of Hindus. Local Muslims, he wrote, believed their religious rights would be infringed by this and became, I quote, sulky. The Hindus, in turn, would not agree to anything, he wrote. I strongly advise both sections in order to avoid future disturbances to come to some mutual understanding, the officer finally recorded. The unhappy compromise, or was it the presence of British troops, kept Rishra out of the headlines for a century and a quarter after. And then the nightmares resurfaced. Fixing India's problems with communal violence will need many things, political, social, economic, but one of them has to be effective police forces that are structured to respond to crises without political micromanagement and orders. The Ram Navami riots, some of which took place in states where the political executive has no evident interest in perpetuating communal violence, has demonstrated deep institutional weaknesses, and that should concern all of us, even those who don't care very much about communal violence. The failure of police forces to preempt and then end the Delhi riots of 2022 ended up deeply embarrassing India on the world stage. It shows this crisis of policing has reached critical proportions. The capabilities of police forces are indivisible. There's no such thing as a force which is very independent and competent to control terrorism and insurgencies and organized crime, but can't handle communal violence. Imagining the price that could be paid for dysfunctional, doddering police doesn't need a lot of imagination, and it should worry all of us. At ThePrint, we bring you news that matters. Our team of journalists and columnists gets you the most comprehensive coverage. To sustain such journalism, we need readers and viewers like you to take paid subscriptions. Click on the link in the description below for exclusive subscriber-only benefits. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm National Security Editor of ThePrint. Thank you for listening to Security Code.